I'm Sick Nick Mondo, and this is THT Podcast. Visit thtpodcast.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tuesday, 8:05 p.m. Eastern. Check us out at thtpodcast.com, and today we have a very special guest. We have none other than Sick Nick Mondo. How's it going, man?
What's up? Doing good. I'm calling from Tokyo. It's actually going on a little bit after 9 in the morning here. So, yeah, good to be here.
Wow.
Jeez, almost 12-hour difference, man.
That'd be Thursday morning over there, too, right?
It's Wednesday morning.
Sorry.
Yeah, Wednesday morning here. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Man. First call.
Calling from
like
the
I
future.
Yes, you are. Like I said, you're a lucky man. I love Japan. I've never had the opportunity to go there, but you know, just the culture and everything. It's really fascinating. So I'm a big fan of Japan, man. And one of the first questions: how did you adapt to the Japanese culture? And at first, when you got exposed to it, did you like it, or was it something that you had to kind of adapt to and have it grow on you?
The first time I came here was in the year 2000. I did a tour with CZW in Big Japan Pro Wrestling, and I had left the country one other time. I was only 20 years old. I'd been to Spain once, and you know, it was different. It was somewhat different there, but it didn't feel like I was on another planet. But coming to Japan, it's like, where am I? And like, why do these people behave like this? It's really a different world. So, but I loved it and always wanted to come back. And 2011 was when I moved here. And it was after the big earthquake and tsunami, and I had a job doing documentary videos, like up in the disaster zone area. So on top of just how different this whole world is here, I was thrown right into, you know, post-disaster, just the city's completely crumbled. And so I can't quite convey how surreal it was being thrown into all that, but I was really up for an adventure, and, you know, that's what it's been. So I really enjoy myself here still to this day.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, just if somebody wasn't familiar with you personally, just based off your wrestling and your reputation, you wouldn't expect you to be such a nice guy, but you really are not your traditional deathmatch wrestler that you may have met. You know, you're really a nice guy, and that's awesome, man. That's awesome that you're in Japan, and I'm glad that you're doing something other than wrestling. And, you know, the documentary, let's kind of segue into that. You got the trade coming out, so why don't you go ahead and plug that and let us know where we can find that, the release date, and what it's really about.
Yeah, thank you. The trade, I suppose you could call it a docudrama. That's, I guess, the technical term. It's going to be more narrative than documentary, so more scripted scenes, basically, like a movie than documentary. But, yeah, so I had a brief wrestling career, you could say. It was a little less than 5 years. Wrestled as Nick Mondo, primarily in CZW, but it was a very, very hard-hitting, very violent style. I had a lot of fun, but your body tends to wear out pretty quickly if you're going to wrestle that way. And my plan was always to get out of it, you know, before I destroyed myself. Unfortunately, that was the case. But this project, gosh, how do I sum it up? Some people know of another wrestler named Rory Little Mondo, and he's somebody who picked up my gimmick basically after I retired and was performing basically as my character. He was a fan back in my CZW days, about 10 years younger than me. And I returned to the CZW ring about 10 years after I retired. This was the end of 2013 for Rory's final match. And there's a lot of emotion tied up in that. And I'll just say, if it weren't for that return to the ring, I don't think this project would have happened. I've been so far removed from the ring that I really didn't think that I'd make a film along these lines. But it got a really good response, fortunately, when I came back to CZW and just shook loose all sorts of ideas in my head. And so I realized, you know what, like, I've got a pretty crazy story I think I could tell. And I don't think I've ever seen a film that quite goes into the why behind deathmatch wrestling and what some of these guys are doing in the ring. And particularly myself, I've never really gotten into that, you know, publicly. And so this film is definitely a look at the reason behind, my career as an extremely violent deathmatch wrestler, and also a look at the impact that it's had on people. I mean, some good, but some negative as well, and some of the implications of what I've done and how it's affected a younger generation, and how sometimes that can be a little bit troubling to me. That I get people contacting me all the time, like, I'm doing this because of you, and it's flattering, but at the same time, there are people getting sliced up and breaking bones and getting concussions, and it's like, how do you handle that? So that's the project in a nutshell. It's just a look at my life and I guess the impact that I've had on some younger folks. So release date is not set. I will finish this film about fall time this year, 2015. Start entering it in festivals. I hope to premiere it in a festival probably early 2016. And usually at festivals, that's where you can find project markets, meet up with producers, distributors, and get your film sold. So early 2016 is when I'm hoping to have a good distribution deal, as wide as possible, many countries as possible. So that's the plan.
We're certainly looking forward to that. But
Definitely.
I got to watch the trailer, and I really, really like how it's well produced, and just the texture, the gritty texture of the film, everything to it. I really like how you've shot the film, and it is really different. But speaking of Rory Mondo, he retired 2 years ago at Cage of Death, where you made your appearance, and how surreal is it to have somebody really be in that crowd in your beginning days and kind of follow you and basically mimic your whole career? I know you briefly mentioned it, but just the fact that he actually basically wore the same outfit as you and would put the sick on his, and he'd paint the sick on his forehead, and it has to be like a powerful moment to see somebody and be like, hey, I really had a big influence on the guy, regardless of the fact that, of course, he's had physical damage to his body, but he got to live his dream through you. So it has to be something special.
It really was, and I've said this before, but I knew that Roy was training, as a teenager, as 14, 15, 16, hanging around the school all the time, CZW school. But he surprised me when he debuted. Like, I had no idea he was going to wrestle as my character, and so it was really amusing, really flattering, and he did a good job. I got the gimmick down and everything, but eventually he was really starting to suffer some injuries and mimicking the exact same things that I did, and I started feeling a certain responsibility in all of it. And I think some people know, when I came back to the Cage of Death event, which ended up being his last match, his plan was to take the Weed Whacker like 2 times to the stomach, like to close out the show. They were just gonna beat him to a bloody pulp and destroy him, and he was going to retire that night, and that was going to be the end of his career, just like laying bleeding in the ring. And it just hit me, like, that's really sad. I don't want to see him go out that way. And we actually made a deal. I said, listen, man, like, I know I took the Weed Whacker and it got a lot of attention, but number one, it really messed me up, and number two, like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with you doing that. Like, it's just, you making your own decision to get hurt is one thing, but like, you're reliving what I did, and I don't feel good about that, like, you hurting yourself because of what I did. And I finally just said, listen, man, if I make an appearance in your match, like, will you not do that? And he said, okay. And to tell the truth, I didn't even want to come out and do that. Like, I didn't want to come out to the show and do it. It was kind of a lot of pressure. I didn't know how well it was going to go over, or how it wasn't. What I did in the ring does matter to me. I didn't want it to be like a bad, final taste in the fans' mouths, but it went over really well, and it really was surreal to be there, and it felt like a special moment. And again, that kind of inspired me to make this entire film project that I'm working on now. But it's quite a story, what Rory's done, and in the end, I'm really proud of him, and that he got out in good shape. He just graduated from college, and he's doing really well. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a story, man.
Wow. Yeah, it's definitely awesome to see him kind of move on with his life, and of course his brother Drew Gulak is still involved. But I follow him on Facebook. It's cool to see him travel and kind of live the life after wrestling. But Boxman, you got another question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, was there a specific injury that made you retire, or was it just a snowball of beatings?
It really wasn't due to injuries that I retired. The thing is, coming into Tournament of Death 2, my final performance, like I was in bad shape, and I ended up breaking my wrist just a week before that event. Had a match at the ECW Arena, for CCW, and screwed up a springboard leg drop to the outside, came up short on a table, and broke my wrist in 3 places. And
Ow.
I was like, oh man, but I had already planned ahead of time that TOD2 was going to be my final performance, and just put like a fiberglass, like a form-fitting cast on at the show. They actually did it at TOD, so I could perform. And so after that event, after TOD2, I really needed a break regardless. But within, I'd say 3 months or so, I would have been good to come back, or at least in the level of health that I normally was in when I would wrestle. I was always hurt a little bit, but no, the plan was always for me to have a short career. I was going to art school at the same time as I was wrestling in CZW, and it was just too much to carry all at the same time. And I always saw it as a hobby, not a career, pro wrestling, which I know isn't the mindset of most people, but for me it was just something I wanted to dabble in for a while.
Well, makes sense. I mean, you got in, and you got out. I mean, that's it. You got to do what you loved, and you got out before you were in a wheelchair. Good for you, is what I say.
Thanks, man. Yeah, there are healthier, better ways of wrestling, and there were definitely times that I envied people like that. Like, why did I choose to do it this way? But my plan was just to hit it really hard and then get out, which is why sometimes I worry when people getting into wrestling but have more long-term plans. If they try and mimic what I was doing, it's like, guys, I wasn't setting an example for a long-term career. You have to realize, you're doesn't matter how tough, how strong you are, you're going to break down at some point. I mean, it's going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned deathmatch wrestling, but you actually had great in-ring ability as far as, technical and also high flying. I mean, you were one of the first people that I ever saw doing the double stomp from the top turnbuckle, and now you see pretty much everybody in the WWE is using that. Finn Balor, that's his finishing move. But where would you see yourself today? Would it be still doing deathmatch if you were in ring, if you were actively still in ring? But or would you see yourself doing something else and maybe going to NXT or somewhere else and completely changing your style?
If I was going to hang around wrestling, I definitely would have gotten out of the death matches. And I'm a big fan of martial arts. Since I left CZW, I've spent time training in Taekwondo, and some people know I actually went to China for a while, specifically to live and train full-time in Kung Fu. I mean, I was doing it 8 hours a day. I'm living in a temple.
Wow.
It's like boot camp, man. It was ridiculous, but that was at a time when I was actually considering coming back to the ring. And what I had in mind was initially coming back under a hood, and I was going to see if I could wear something covering my torso so that fans wouldn't recognize me, cover up the scars in my tattoo. But I literally wanted to take a page out of Hayabusa's book, which, I mean, he did the death matches as well, but more, I guess, just more flying and more martial arts based. And I had more in mind, like a Ring of Honor or maybe like TNA or Path, something like that, rather than coming back to the death matches. And so I do think that would be a really good time, honestly, to do something like that. But it takes your whole life. I mean, sometimes fans say to me, "Oh, why don't you just come back for one more match?" And it's like, if I were to come back for one more match, like I'd probably want to spend a good 6 months training in the ring, because I can get in good physical shape, but getting in ring shape and getting smooth and getting crisp, I mean, you don't just roll out of bed and do that. I mean, that takes a lot of work. So, so I guess that's how I see it. It would take my whole life if I were to want to do something like that.
Well, that's understandable. And speaking of Hayabusa, I guess he's walking again, and his goal is to make another in-ring appearance, which personally, I don't want to see him do that and risk his career. But I definitely see the resemblance between Hayabusa and you because, you know, from the pants to the high flying and mixed with the deathmatch wrestling, and that's hands down one of my favorites. So it's kind of cool to see you mention Hayabusa. But IWA Mid South, you were also briefly in IWA Mid South. Any thoughts on Ian Rotten?
Yeah, he was always you know, good to me. You know, he had a big beef with CZW. A lot of people know that, and he and John weren't too happy, and John, you know, would grumble. We're talking about Zandig would grumble that I'm working for Ian, and hey, you can't work for him, and you know, I'd say, John, like, we're not, you know, wrestlers under contract. You're not giving me a big payday. It's just like we're indie wrestlers, and if you got a problem with Ian, like, you can fix it. And said the same thing to Ian. Like, I don't want to hear about your problems with John. Like, that doesn't involve me, you know? Like, I want to work for your company. I want to work for John's. I want to work wherever. And so, you know, I had no problems with Ian. And he treated me well. And a lot of people know in my final match at TOD2, I mean, I got hurt really bad in the second match and had a terrible concussion. And so I was really at Ian's mercy in my final match, which the match ended up sucking. And I mean, it was because I was so hurt, but he really just walked me through that whole match and kind of hand-fed me everything. And I'm grateful for that. You know, he took care of me and everything in that final match. So I'm really not in touch with him or anybody from IWA Mid-South much these days. But you know, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Oxman, you got another question?
I was going to ask, since you're on the CZW and John Zandig, I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on Zandig, since you did, you know, work under him in CZW.
Yeah, specific question or
the difference between really like DJ Hyde and John Zandig, how it's different nowadays.
Yeah, well, John's one of those guys where you know, he has a real tough guy gimmick in the ring, but he's somebody, I'll say, who it's legit. I mean, he's a scary man. He's a really tough man, but he's quiet. He's reserved in his words. He doesn't tend to say a ton to people. And some people are intimidated by that. And like I said, he's a legit tough guy. But like when you talk to him, he was always kind to me. He was always how do I put it? Well, I'll just say this: the way he ran CZW, it was really the Wild West, and it really was a dangerous environment. A lot of these shows, and I think the fans felt that it's like, you know, you better watch out. You don't know what's going to happen. Something could come flying in the crowd, and it was legit. And I know CZW of today is much more controlled, I guess you could say. And some people gripe and complain and say they miss the way that it was, but I'll just say, as a business today, it's run much better. And I'm not speaking on the product, and I don't even know much about the product because I don't watch CZW. But
right.
I could not believe when I came back to Cage of Death about a year and a half ago, how many people came up and just said, "Is there anything that you need?" Like, "Hi, I'm working to do this and to keep things flowing well." And you know, the schedule, the timing, the catering, the food, everything, everybody was taken care of. And you know, DJ rallies everybody together and says, "Here's what's going on, and I'm proud of you guys," and this and that. And so I'll just say this: like, John Zandig put together a really exciting product, and like a wild and a dangerous product, but just like the back was pretty unorganized. And you know, I'd show up a lot of times and it's like, "Who am I wrestling tonight?" And it's like, "Well, hold on, we don't know yet." And you know, the show's starting, and then I find out, and just no time to put my match together. And so I'll just say, like, the end product I know is really exciting in an environment like that, but it was stressful a lot of times as a wrestler. You know, I like to think way ahead. I like to plan. I like to envision. I like to train, practice spots if I can. So I guess that's the difference.
Sounds like WCW 1999. From the stories I've heard, it sounds almost exactly like it.
Yeah. Yeah. My best matches in CZW were always the ones where I had time to plan. Like, Messiah, I knew I was going to be wrestling him several weeks in advance, and was training with Eric Cannon, actually, at the local gym where I lived, and practicing spots and coming up with ideas. But sometimes they just throw everybody out in the ring in CZW and just have a wild brawl, and that could be really exciting, but those matches don't always work, So
yeah,
definitely. Now, you briefly talked about wrestling in the CZW Arena. Now, of course, I'm from Philadelphia, so how do you did you like wrestling in front of the tri-state area, like the Jersey and the Philly crowd? And also, of course, XPW did some shows at the ECW Arena. Were you ever approached by XPW to work for them, or no contact?
Yeah, I did have a couple guys hit me up from XPW, and there are a couple of wrestlers who would help with booking back in the day. And, I had a couple contact me like, hey, if you want to work here, doors open. And, I didn't shoot them down like real harsh or anything. Like I knew some of those guys. I wrestled out in California, and we'd go hang out with them, And I know the fans, big split. They get all angry, and some of the wrestlers do have legit beef, between each other. But I'd chat with those guys, and I'd hang out with them. And so, the offer was there, but I just said no. It's going to be too much heat, because the management too. Obviously, there was some real heat between the management of those companies, but wrestling in that arena, man, that was a dream come true. I mean, I was 15 years old, 16 years old, 17, 18, going there for ECW shows, and anybody who is there, yourself included, knows that there's never been anything quite like that in wrestling. And as far as I know, nothing since. Just quite the atmosphere that Paul Heyman generated with his product. So that was a real privilege to wrestle there. I haven't been there in a long time. I've seen pictures. It looks nothing like it used to, and it probably doesn't even feel like the same place.
Oh no,
it's really impressive what they turned that building into, and maybe for the better. You can't just hold on to that whole ECW ghost forever. It looks like a legit wrestling boxing facility now, and but I'm just saying, for those who were there back in the ECW days, that was really something special.
Yeah, and they've actually paid homage to the old ECW by painting a mural on the wall. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of nice. But they actually have bathrooms nowadays with doors.
Oh, man, I remember that bathroom.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I remember, man. I used to be like a 12-year-old kid going in there, just, oh my God, I just couldn't. I would hold it till I got home. It was that bad, It
was part of the environment, man. It's just like
it was
sweaty people and cigarette smoke and disgusting bathroom, and it was really something, man.
Yeah, it really did add to the environment. I can't argue that, man. But just one more brief question: the Weed Whacker spot. Of course, that's one of the most craziest spots I've ever seen in my life. I don't think anything will top that, including Mick Foley jumping off the cage. I mean, that's something that I'll never forget in my life. Was that your idea, or was that Wife Beater, or was that something that Zandig presented to you guys?
It was my idea, and I wasn't the first to do it. It had been done before. Wife Beater had taken it, and I was in Japan, as I mentioned, in 2000, a couple years earlier, and I saw Yamakawa take a particularly brutal one to the stomach, and it was horrifying, and it stayed with me. And it was a small show, a BJW show, and I think it was worse than he was planning on it being, but it really stayed with me. And I was thinking, oh man, like I think I want to do this at the right time, as twisted as that is. And I remember hearing right before Tournament of Death 1 that there were going to be a lot of press people there, magazines and journalists and everything. And so was like, this is the time to do it, if ever. And but wife beater. When I told him that, he actually didn't want to do it. He said, you have no idea like how bad that hurt when I took it. I mean, I still say he's the toughest guy I've ever met. Wife beater, like the scariest guy I've met. Knowing everybody that I met in the business, but he just said, look, it sucks. You don't need to take that. It's 3 matches in one night. And even John said, you don't need to take that, it's not necessary. And so, no, that one was my own, choosing to take that, but it was awful. It was really bad.
Yeah. I've seen a couple guys take it, including Black Cheese, aka formerly known as Sabian, recently actually at the last Cage of Death. But I mean, when you took it, just seeing that blood splash off your skin was just it's one of those disturbing moments that I'll never forget. But one last question. I mean, I'm sure you were a big fan of guys like Mr. Pogo and Matsunaga and Kanemaru and Atsushi Onita and guys like that. Did you ever come across any of those like hardcore deathmatch legends from Japan in recent years? And if so, how was the interaction? Did they know of your work, and how was the respect? Was it mutually?
Of those guys, Matsunaga, Mr. Danger, he's the only one. I frequently go to his steakhouse here. Do you know about his steakhouse?
Yeah, the Ribera.
Oh, no, not Ribera. Mr. Danger has his own.
Oh, he has his own?
Yeah, and let me tell you, like, I kid you not, it's the best steak I've ever had. And the irony is he imports his beef from the U.S. And but he marinates it in his own special sauce, and he was trained. Like he found this steak restaurant that he really admired and studied under them for a while, and he's the one in the kitchen cooking the steak and preparing it, and just his method, I'm telling you, like it's the best, and it's cheap too. It's only about $20 for a 400-gram steak. That's almost a full pound, and rice and soup and what else, like corn and like a whole set. I mean, it's a lot of food, but so yeah, I love that place, Mr. Danger's Steakhouse. I go there frequently, and he's got pictures in his restaurant, including one of Zandig, like smashing a bunch of light tubes over his head. And he didn't know who I was, but as soon as I told him, well, yeah, I work with Zandig, he's like, oh, wow, and really friendly. And so just seeing him and how successful it's a small little place, but boy, he's got a faithful clientele. And actually, I think he has 2 or 3 other chains that he's opened up because this one has done so well. And people hit him up all the time to come back for matches, but he's like, no, this is my job now, this is what I do. And so it's honestly really just inspiring and refreshing to see him doing so well with his steak restaurant. So yeah, but of the guys you mentioned, he's the only one that I've met here in Japan. FMW just started up again, and Onita is wrestling, and some of the other guys. But Mr. Pogo, I know he's getting over some health problems. I think he had a major back surgery, and I hope he's doing okay. Last I heard, he was still in the hospital recovering. But yeah, these guys are still around in Japan.
Definitely, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on, man. Any other movies, documentaries, anything else you're working on that you'd like to discuss before you leave?
I'm working on multiple projects. I probably shouldn't go into all of them right now, but the biggest one is also a Yakuza film, like a true story Yakuza film. When I was doing the documentary work up in Tohoku, the disaster region, we found a former thief and a hitman for the Yakuza that were doing volunteer work. It was insane. And you kind of gingerly approached them, like, we found out they're really nice, really friendly, and hey, could we shoot some interview material with you? And they're like, yeah, fine. And got a bunch of stories out of them. And so this project has been developing for a couple of years. I wrote a script. We're working with consultants in LA, screenwriting consultants, put the script through 7 drafts. So we're polishing the heck out of it. And now I have these 2 producers working on funding and everything. And if it all works out, we're going to try and shoot it next summer, like with actors playing these men. And I actually have quite a few roles to get some really creepy looking gangsters. Going to hit up some current wrestlers here in Japan, deathmatch wrestlers, and just people for small cameos and appearances. And so it is one that I think wrestling fans would be really excited about. But it's a big project. It's called Two Criminals. That's the title of the film. And but a lot of things need to come together for it to happen still. But I have people working really hard on it right now in the States and in Japan to make it happen. And so that's the other big project right now.
Nice. Well, it definitely sounds excited, man.
Yeah, definitely.
I certainly hope it comes together. And once you update us more with the release date of the documentary, we'll be sure to plug it and keep everybody updated with it.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me. And yeah, I'd love to come back sometime. Definitely,
man. I'll have to get the address for the steakhouse if I ever come to Japan. I definitely got to try that out.
Trust me, it's the one you want to visit at Mr. Dangerous Steakhouse. So look it up online. You'll find it if you just search Mr. Dangerous Steakhouse, and it's a place to be.
Well, I'll have to make that happen one of these times when FMW is hosting a show. I'll have to go to one of those and go to a steakhouse.
Yes.
But also on Twitter, David Russell wants to give you a shout out. He's a big fan. He just wants to say thank you for everything you've done. So shout out to him for listening as well. And once again, thank you for coming on and joining us, man. We greatly appreciate this.
Definitely.
Appreciate it, Shaheen, and the people who called in. Thanks for your time. And I wish you the best.
Definitely, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Sick Nick Mondo, and this is THT Podcast. Visit thtpodcast.com.